Okay, this is the second act of Antony and Cleopatra. We start in Rome. Remember that there are these binary oppositions in Antony and Cleopatra, and one of them is male, female, and one of them is Egypt, Rome. And we just came from a scene in Act 1, Scene 5 that was both Egyptian and very feminine, plus a eunuch, plus one intact male. But it's still a very feminized scene, and it shows a kind of intimacy between women. It does not quite pass the Bechdel test, which you remember a Bechdel test is that there are two women and at some point they talk to each other and it's not about a man. Unfortunately, it is mostly about a man, but it's this close. It's very close. And again, just like All's Well That Ends Well, which I've discussed in other places, there is this intimacy and support and kindness between women, long-standing relationships that are longer than either of Cleopatra's two relationships, one with Julius Caesar and the other with Mark Antony. And now, in Act 2, we move back into Rome. And Rome, as advertised, is very logical, it is very sterile, and it is quite male. It's very masculine. And in scene after scene in Rome, you'll see that there are apparently no women in Rome. It isn't until a little bit later that you meet Octavia, who is Octavius's sister. This first scene in Act 2, Scene 1, I hate to ever say this isn't important. It's not as critical. The people you need to know about are Menocrates and Minos, and they are the pirates who were mentioned earlier, and Pompey. Pompey is the son of an important man. Pompey the Great was Julius Caesar's great rival. Ptolemy, who was Cleopatra's brother, pre-executed him for Caesar and gave him Pompey's head. And Caesar wasn't appreciative, did not like this at all. It was a terrible thing to do even to an enemy because this is another Roman, right? Like a lot of sons of important men, he doesn't quite come up to snuff. He doesn't have what his father had, his father Pompey the Great. Both of them are admirals, but part of what Pompey here is doing is making his claim to be as important as his father. The idea, Pompey says he has acclaimed this. He feels just in what he does. If the great gods be just, they shall assist the deeds of justest men. Well, the gods aren't always just, Pompey, but that's the way it goes. Now, of course, Menocrates and Minos, since they're pirates, have a slightly different view. Pompey is certain that things are going to go well for him. I shall do well. The people love me, and the sea is mine. My powers are crescent, and my auguring hope says it will come to the full. He's counting on Mark Antony being distracted by both Egypt and Cleopatra. That she has some kind of witchcraft, let witchcraft join with beauty. That if he can drive a wedge between Octavius and Antony, and therefore Cleopatra becomes important in that she draws Antony to one side, that it causes a friction between Octavius and Antony, that it gives Pompey an opening, which it's not going to do, just so you know. This second scene in Scene 2, Lepidus is trying so hard to make peace between these two guys, and he comes across, I think, as weak. He keeps being a sort of mediator, and it doesn't really help. Something else to know is that Enobarbus and Agrippa are sort of very much Antony's and Caesar's right-hand men. They are like their masters or like their friends plus, but also you'll notice that once Antony and Octavius leave, there's a certain amount of relaxation there. Lepidus is encouraging Enobarbus to please let Antony be nice, go ahead and persuade him. And Enobarbus says, no, I shall entreat him to answer like himself. If Caesar move him, let Antony look over Caesar's head and speak as loud as Mars. No, we're not doing that. Let him talk for himself. 'Tis not a time for private stomaching. Every time serves for the matter that is then born in it. Well, but yeah, it's little things. No, this does not presage well. Antony and Caesar, you'll notice that there's this an implied stage direction. Here comes the noble Antony and yonder Caesar. If you are looking at a Jacobean stage, that implies they come in from two separate doors. They are obviously not going to enter together. Lepidus, again, is trying to persuade them to be nice. It's very tense. Then, noble partners, the rather for I earnestly beseech, touch you the sourest points with sweetest terms, nor cursedness grow to the manner. 'Tis spoken well. Were we before our armies and to fight, I should do this. Welcome to Rome. Thank you. Sit, sir. Sit, sir. No, nay then. So there's a power struggle over who's going to sit first. And you almost imagine this as being like a Western where they each are covering the other. Who's going to be the first to drop their guns? That's how intense the sitting is. Normally, when you see this on an Elizabethan stage, the person to sit first is the person in a position of power. If you are a king, you get to sit, and if you have a subject, then they get to sit when the king tells him, yes, you may sit, either gestures or says so. You can see some of this in Twelfth Night, where as Olivia sits down, if I do not usurp myself, I am, the fact that she sits down indicates that there is a disparity in rank between her and Maria. Antony's saying, I know that you are taking some things poorly, and Caesar says, well, it's not about me, of course. It's not about my emotions, but it's about the problems. My being in Egypt, Caesar, what was it to you? No more than my residing here in Rome might be to you in Egypt. Yet if you there did practice on my state, your being in Egypt might be my question. How intend you practiced? You may be pleased to catch at mine intent by what did here befall me. Your wife and brother made wars upon me. Oh, so that's the problem. You remember Fulvia from before? Fulvia was actually mounting a war. As I suggested, this was a love match. So Antony seems to have, he seems to be attracted to strong women, strong enough to mount wars. And Antony's excuse was, first of all, I tried to talk my brother out of it. Line 61. As for my wife, I would you had her spirit in some other. The third of the world is yours, which is a snaffle you may pace easy, but not such a wife. Think about this. He's talking about use his wife as a horse. A snaffle bit is the easiest kind of bit to ride a horse with. implies that the horse is easy to deal with. So you can go across a third of the world with a horse with a snaffle bit, but not my wife. She's that tough. It's not my fault. This is not Roman. Roman men are supposed to have control over their wives, and Antony just doesn't. That's why, in a way, Caesar takes this so amiss. You should have had control. If your wife is acting poorly, that means you must have told her to do it. And we know that with Antony, that's not necessarily true. Another thing in the rulership styles or the governance styles of the two men, Caesar takes it amiss that I wrote to you when rioting in Alexandria, you did pocket up my letters and with taunts did jibe my missive out of audience. I gave you letters. I told you something important, and you just put them aside. That's Antony. That's Caesar's way of dealing with things. And Antony says, Sir, he fell upon me, ere admitted then. 3 kings I had newly feasted, and did want of what I was in the morning. But next day I told him of myself, which was as much as to have asked him pardon. Let this fellow be nothing of our strife. So Antony says, well, yeah, I'd kind of partied rather hard. I wasn't in shape to talk to him about something serious. But then I apologized. First of all, Caesar would never apologize to somebody who was below him in rank. And even though Antony was, he was getting drunk, he was having a party, but that was a business dinner. That was a business party. And that is not the way things are done in Rome. That's the way things are done in the luxurious, uncontrolled, decadent East. To the Romans, this might be seen as what the 19th century British called going native. I hate that term, but that's what they would have called it. Antony has become too Egyptianized. Antony has taken the attitude that if I'm going to do business in Egypt, be like an Egyptian. You know the saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Well, when in Egypt, do as the Egyptians do. Caesar says, you've broken the article of your oath. Whew, wait. Lepidus says, no, don't call him a liar. Don't call him an oath breaker. That's pouring gas on the fire. Antony apologizes once again. He says, don't call me that. But Fulvia was doing this partly to get me out of Egypt and away from Cleopatra. And Maecenas, who is another guy who is on Caesar's side, well, don't let this be as important. Enobarbus is always jumping in with something that seems a little inappropriate. And it's, well, I don't so much dislike the matter, but the manner of his speech. For it cannot be we shall remain in friendship, our conditions so differing in their acts. Yet, if I knew what hoop should hold a stench from edge to edge of the world, I would pursue it. Is there something that could possibly bring us closer together? And Agrippa says, I have something. And what he says is, well, thou hast a sister by the mother's side, admired Octavia. Great Mark Antony is now a widower. Say not so, Agrippa. If Cleopatra heard you, your reproof were well deserved your rashness. I am not married, Caesar. Antony, you should not have done that. Antony is offered by Agrippa. He suggests marry Octavius' sister. This is not uncommon. One of the ways to deal with some of the problems in Roman culture would be for one man to marry another's sister, or for somebody to divorce his wife and then marry somebody else, and then somebody would adopt somebody as their son. So they would use familial ties to cement political ties. This is a reasonable suggestion if it wasn't for the specter of Cleopatra in the background. And it's not going to work. Everybody knows it's not going to work. Most of all, Antony. So he brings whatever comes on himself. Agrippa says, to hold you in perpetual amity, to make you brothers and to knit your hearts with an unslipping knot, take Antony Octavia to his wife, whose beauty claims no worse a husband than the best of men, whose virtue and whose general graces speak that which none else can utter. Octavia is the perfect woman, as we'll see. She's virtuous, she's quiet, to almost the point of silence. She's obedient. She's everything that both a Roman and ideally a Renaissance man would expect as female virtue. Not so much Cleopatra. Something that's interesting in Shakespeare's plays are that even the women will say things like, I should not have done this, or this is what is appropriate behavior. However, Juliet says this, the one exception to this rule is Miranda, because she's been raised outside of social customs and she doesn't realize that you don't declare your love and you don't propose, that women don't do that because her father never taught her that. The expectation is her love to both would each to other, and all loves to both draw after her. No, truths would then be tales, where half tales be truths. This should fix it, and I love that he says, pardon what I have spoke, for 'tis a studied, not a present thought, by duty ruminated. Something I have always suspected is that this is not Agrippa's idea. This is Caesar's idea. And that he uses Agrippa to bring it forward, knowing, in fact, that this is what is going to happen. He's going to marry his sister to Antony. Antony will be unfaithful, and then he will have an excuse to make war and hopefully beat Antony. Can't prove it, because that involves hurting his sister, but that tells you something. Your way of reading this tells you a lot, both about Octavius and also about the rest of this play and how you read it. Caesar says, well, is Caesar cool with this? Not till he hears how Antony is touched with what is spoke already. What power is in Agrippa, if I would say, Agrippa be it so, to make this good? The power of Caesar and his power to Octavia. Woo! So all Caesar has to do is say, Octavia, marry this dude. Can you imagine doing that to Cleopatra? It's not just that there isn't anybody who could say that, she is the queen, but also you can't imagine anybody saying that to her. Caesar says, in a way it's a warning, there's my hand, right before line 150. A sister I bequeath you, whom no brother did ever love so dearly. Let her live to join our kingdoms and our hearts, and never fly off our loves again. Happily, amen. I did not think to draw my sword against Pompey, for he hath laid strange courtesies and great of late to me. So this seems like it is going to work out. On the other hand, there is this threat that if it doesn't work out, it's going to be worse than if it never happened. Now, if you've ever read Beowulf, there's this concept of the peace weaver that you would have between warring tribes or warring factions of a family. You would marry one woman into another family. Well, that's great when it works, but in Beowulf, there's some clear looking backwards and also looking forwards to the fact that this doesn't work, that eventually at some point it breaks down and then the woman is caught in the middle like a rag doll ripped apart by two vicious children. Once Antony and Caesar have left and they've had the flourish just means that kind of trumpet thing. And that's what it always means when it appears. Now you can get some relaxation with Maecenas and Agrippa and Enobarbus, where they don't have to be as defensive and they're friendly. And then also Maecenas really wants to know, wow, what was Egypt like? And he says that it was great. Ay, sir, we did sleep day out of countenance and made the night light with drinking. 8 wild boars and roasted whole at a breakfast, and but 12 persons there. Is this true? This was at a fly to an eagle. We had much more monstrous matter of feast, which worthily deserved noting. She's a most triumphant lady, if report be square to her. When first she met Mark Antony, she pursed up his heart on the river of Kidnos. This particular speech, Act 2, Scene 2, Enobarbus' speech, is one of the great set pieces of this play and in Shakespeare generally. It's probably not true, but if you compare it to Thomas North's translation of Plutarch, it's very accurate. What it isn't, or North's translation isn't, is poetic. One of the things Shakespeare does is that he personifies everything. The oars have personality, and it's not only that they have personality, but it's all sexualized in these waves that come off of Cleopatra. I am not as good as, say, Patrick Stewart, so if you can find Patrick Stewart doing this, but let's just pick it apart. I will tell you, the barge she sat on, like a burnished throne, burnt on the water. The poop was beaten gold, purple the sails, and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them. The oars were silver, which the tune of flutes kept stroke, and made the water which they beat to follow faster, as amorous of their strokes. So again, you have this personification that the oars are stroking the water, and the water is responding as though the oars and the water were engaged in some kind of sensual act. Cleopatra herself is described as so amazing that she, quote, beggars all description. She did lie in her pavilion, cloth of gold of tissue, o'er picturing that Venus where we see the fancy outwork nature. And she has cupids. They're all these adoring, pretty dimpled boys with fans, and they did seem to glow the delicate cheeks, which they did cool. This is a very conscious presentation of a Roman goddess of Venus. And remember, I mentioned that there is this explicit tug between Mars and Venus in this play, which Janet Edelman has gone into. It's really a great book. You really must read it. Her gentlewomen are dressed like the Nereids. They're like mermaids. There's a helm where there's a seeming mermaid. Everything is made of things that you would not put on a normal ship. There is silver, there's silken ropes. This wouldn't make any sense on a, quote, real ship, but it does for this costume ship, for this pageant ship, which would also be something that the Renaissance audience had heard about. Now, in Elizabeth's era, there was this pomp and presentations and pageantry, but it was done for the people to see in royal processions. The big important things might be done at a palace, but she would make a progress where people could see her go by. James did not like being part of a spectacle. So this would be like a mask. In fact, it bears some resemblance to Queen Anne's Tethys Festival. It would be interesting to see if there's some kind of connection there. The King's Men, Shakespeare's company, did in fact play some of the speaking roles in these masks, so it's not that they wouldn't have known. From the barge, a strange invisible perfume hits the sense of the adjacent wharves. The city cast forth its people upon her. So everybody goes to see her, and Antony is left sitting in the marketplace, where that was supposed to be the moment where she came to him. Nope. She put on a performance, and it was so good that everybody went to look at her. Antony invites her to supper, and she one-ups him by inviting him to supper, where she is both very seductive, but also notice the costuming, the pageantry, the ways in which she is presenting herself like a goddess. Also, the characterization of Antony, our courteous Antony, whom never the word of no woman ever could speak. Antony can't say no to a woman. We're learning a lot about him, and my suspicion is that Cleopatra must already know about him. She already knows how to get his attention, and it works. Agrippa makes a reference to Caesar having slept with her and that she had a son by Caesar. Now, it's described as he plowed her and she cropped, but this actually poses a political problem. Octavius is not Caesar's real son. Caesar didn't have much in the way of real sons. Octavius is an adopted son. Caesarion, Caesar's son, is Cleopatra's son. So there's potential for some real threat coming from Cleopatra's son. If he wants to muscle in saying, hey, I'm Caesar's real son, he could. And that would be yet another reason, unspoken by Octavius, but a real reason for him to see it as a threat. Maecenas says, well, he has to give her up. Now Antony must leave her utterly. Never. He will not. Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety. Other women cloy the appetites they feed, but she makes hungry where most she satisfies. There's something about her that makes you want her more. I'm tempted to compare her to potato chips. Never have just one. But she makes hungry where most she satisfies. And also, vilest things become themselves from her, that the holy priests bless her when she is riggish. No matter how sexual she is treated like a goddess. Maybe that's appropriate in Egypt. Who knows? Could be. But there is something about Cleopatra that is endlessly attractive. Even she may not be aware of to what extent. Maecenas says, if beauty, wisdom, modesty can settle the heart of Antony, Octavia is a blessed lottery to him. Yes, but beauty and wisdom and modesty, and Enobarbus tried to say that and explicitly says it later, is not what Antony wants. Antony wants somebody like Cleopatra, who is strong and possibly dangerous and full of surprises. So we'll pick up there, and we'll pick up with Act 2, Scene 3.